Sorry. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce, and a lot of you know Professor Stout. Professor Brian Stout, he is our Dean of Social Sciences. He is also the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Humanities, Art and Social Cluster. And also he was instrumental in funding the Sydney consultation process that took place in December for the working group. And so I feel like this is not an Oprah full circle moment, but almost maybe a half circle moment. So everyone, please welcome.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're in direct land and pay my respects to elders past and present. Thank you to Kathleen, and thank you for accommodating me at a different time. I know it has been a challenge. There's so much great content. It has been a challenge for Kathleen to keep everybody to time. She can feel, and I have to summarise a lot of what's going on today. It's a lot of content. She can have confidence because I do have a 1:30 train to catch. So she knows that I can't overrun too much. I just want to say a couple of things. I do know a lot of you here. I just want to say a couple of things about myself as a way of introduction before I get into some of the summary points. So I am the second person that you'll hear from today with an Irish accent who claims a South African connection. So my background is in social work and youth justice social work. I lived for 3 years in South Africa, in Eastern Cape, where I worked at Fort Hare University, and I did my PhD when I was there on youth justice and on children's rights. So I very much recognise that my background is as a youth justice practitioner as well. I recognise some of what you say about the toll that work takes on young people, challenges of their lives. But also I wrote down the phrase an implementation gap of rights that are protected in a fractured space. It did feel like a quote from my PhD, and that is absolutely an issue with rights, the idea of claim for rights. And thanks to Cursor for that presentation. I don't feel I can summarise everything. In fact, I don't want to even attempt to do so, but I'm going to go from the 2 A's to the 3 A's. And start by acknowledging, because I think even though I'm not the last speaker, I do want to acknowledge the incredible work that Kathleen and Tori and others have done in arranging this event. It brings such an amazing range of speakers and participants together, both here and online. So thank you so much for doing that and for your leadership in this space, both in this event in December and the event that's here today. I also want to acknowledge it has to be made so far. There's only an amazing picture that we've been looking at, and I think it's lovely to see that and to see again just as a mark of the care that's been put in today and preparing for today. And I would also, and I'm acknowledging everybody in the room, but also just acknowledge colleagues in the School of Social Sciences. I've recognised a couple of names online. We do have colleagues in the room as well, and that brings me on to my point about advocacy. So I'll come back to that in a second. But one of the things that I have thought about, I read, and thanks again for Kathleen for circulating this statement with the findings and recommendations. I think what we have 125 findings and recommendations. It's an incredibly dense document. It's a confronting document, and I know the final report will be like that as well. And for me, we all come at these from our own perspectives. For me, with the background in the criminal justice system, and we've talked a lot about the criminal justice system in December, I have to say, depressingly, there's nothing there that's surprising. There's nothing there that if you look at the flaws in the criminal justice system that we know about, we know particularly the impact on young people, and then you put a racism lens on top of that as well, the outcomes are depressingly what we thought that they would be, and we know that the criminal justice system is often a way that racism and other forms of discrimination operate, and in fact that's a mechanism that we just heard. But I also looked at it from an educational lens, and I think that and again I'm not going to say this now, but I've gone through and marked the points where it does talk about education, where it talks about things that universities can do, and that's what I want to particularly pick up on at the moment, because I think that's something, and Dr. Reynolds' amazing opening, addressed, set the tone for the day so clearly, and I did joke to Kathy, I could just simply repeat all of it and we'd all be happy, but I just repeat some of it. But to say particularly that focus on action, and particularly the focus on advocacy and on alliances, is really one the point that I just want to reiterate today. I know Adam enjoyed Adam's data, and one of the things I think about from our point of view about the data is, as a school of social sciences, we have about 100 staff in the school. I reckon we're in double figures if we think of people who have either an African heritage or have lived and worked in Africa. If you then look at people who have very strong African partnerships and connections, and bring in to our adjuncts and bring in our PhD students as well, we're probably looking at double that number. So that's maybe 10%, 50%, depending on what measurements you use, about 10% of our staff have these very, very strong connections with Africa, which is brilliant. It's a really good place for us to be, and it's something I'm really proud of. It brings a real asset to the school. But when I think about our students, when I think about the students, again, about where they come from, we have a lot of international students. We do have a lot from India and Nepal, but we do have some particularly from Nigeria, from Kenya, from other African countries as well. We do have students of African heritage, but we don't actually measure that. So the data is not there, and I think there's a number of things where there's a number of places in the university, within the school, where some of our data is lagging, and I do think that point about we count and measure what's important to us is opposite here. So that's something I think we need to be thinking about the attention that we give to those issues, but also in curriculum. And I know there's amazing work being done in curriculum, but if we think of the strong African presence that we have within the school, is that something our students experience? I would say some of them do. I would say in some subjects that they do, in some courses that they do, but perhaps we're not utilising that as much as we could do. And that point about the importance of education, the importance of advocacy, is something that I think is really important. And I think in both those things, it's that connection to Africa, but particularly that connection to the African diaspora, the experience of African communities in Australia, and particularly Western Sydney. And we have researchers working on that with PhD students, particularly doing that work at the moment. So I think that's something that we want to take forward as a school. The second point is about alliances, and I think we're very strong in alliances, and the people in this room, I think, demonstrate that. Some of you have very formal alliances through MOUs. Some of you have very formal have alliances that are more through relationships or through particular partnerships or activities. Those are all really, really important to us. Where a school's got a lot of partnerships and a lot of alliances with community groups. We also have alliances across the university, and School of Nursing is represented here in there, but which is great, and a great friend of the school. We have alliances with other universities, and we're always developing our new alliances. So Alfie and I were talking a little bit about the picking up the point about lack of recognition of qualifications that was made. There's an initiative we're going through the School of Medicine in Fairfield of offering support to people who have qualifications from African countries, in particular, starting in medicine, looking to move on to other areas, where we're looking at supporting them through getting those qualifications recognised and getting accredited to work here. So that's a really important piece of work. We also have a new alliance we're working on at the moment, the Challenging Racism Project, which Alana talked about. We have a connection with the Stephen Lawrence Centre in the UK, and looking at moving towards signing an MOU with them and bringing some internationalisation or greater internationalisation to that work. But those alliances are so important to us. The community groups that we work with, the research that we can provide, the way that they can feed into our curriculum, but particularly as well supporting our students as they move towards employment and move forward in their lives and in their careers. So I think the fact that those are just to repeat from the introductory presentation, Dr. Reynolds said as not quite the final talk as well, that idea of what we can do to advocate and what we can do in alliances. And my final point as well is just that point about allyship. And I think it's really important that again, Dr. Reynolds talked about being an ally, and my view of being an ally in any context is it's a verb phrase rather than a noun. Being an ally is something that you do, not it does. Whether it's something that you are is slightly it's slightly less important, but what you do, how you act as an ally, how you build those connections, how you bring forward the agenda, how whenever we get this outstanding, really important report, what we all do as individuals and in the roles that we play to bring those recommendations to action is really key. So thank you again, all of you, for participating today, and thank you to Kathleen and others for it.
Thank you so much. Right, so we have two sets of presentations, and there might be towards the end, but they're certainly not these. So we have Daniel and Delphine, who are founding members of the AAAC, who will come up and have a chat to us about their visits to New York and Geneva as part of the delegation of the AAAC. And I think this is really important work because it's all very fine and well for us to be having these conversations here, but we need to be having those conversations, as Delphine will say, at international levels as well. Because, you know, a little bit of pressure from the bottom and a little bit of pressure from the top helps a lot.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and the whole team for organizing this event. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a great pleasure to be part of it. This has, you know, been going on for a long time, but today is like a realization of a lot of work that has been going in the background. As founding member of AAAC, it's a great honor to have you all. Since I've been given just a few minutes, I'll only talk briefly about the trip. As Kathleen just mentioned, so there has recently been, there was a conference, a UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent that took place in end of May and June in New York. And I was one of the 3 delegates from AAAC who attended that event. And not only the learning, but it was like, people were like, are there Africans in Australia? Like, we're here. So it was the first time ever that Africans, from Australia were represented in that forum. It was a forum that had a theme of realizing the dream, a UN declaration on the promotion, protection, and full respect of the human rights of people of African descent. It was a full-on week that was so intense, and it had, key themes or key discussions. It was global reparatory justice, Pan-Africanism for dignity, justice, and peace, transnational migration, recognizing and addressing systemic and structural racism, a data-driven evidence-based approach, and health, well-being, and intergenerational trauma. So those are themes of the days, different days that were taken, and there was so many side events. There's a lot to talk about that conference, but just to give you a quick picture, it was an event that, gathered member states, United Nations entities, and approximately 900 people, civil society representatives from more than 85 countries. So that's a picture of, I guess, the knowledge, the experience that was there in that the UN headquarters. It was just amazing for us to be able to experience that, to be able to exchange. People who spoken earlier have talked about the alliances. It was amazing to have that experience and to talk to people who've been in that space for a long time. So Australians of African background, we are new to this space. So it was good to hear from people who've been doing this work for a long time. And it was just amazing to experience. And I would maybe recommend everyone to read on the forum's website, those key recommendations. But key things were like, as Kathleen said earlier, the decade that was dedicated to people of African descent, the first one is ending next year. But during that forum, at the end of that forum, they declared a second decade of people of African descent. I think that's amazing, which is a start. Like we said, we saw today, it's the beginning of a lot of work to do, and it's amazing to have this platform. It's amazing to have each and every one of you participating and I guess joining with us or journeying together, actually journeying together, because we are in this together. So it was amazing to learn from those people. And some of the key things they align with what we've been talking about, you know, education, to have the data, to recognize racism as a talking point. It's not a problem. It's a thing, actually something that we need to discuss to have a healthy conversation, to have better outcomes for everyone. Talking about race, it's not, you know, a problem, but we need to embrace it in different ways. So it was amazing that to have the experience, and I'm looking forward to having those conversations. There's a lot of alliances, lots of connections, lots of learning, lots of networks that were formed, and I believe they're going to be key to us African of you know, Australian of African descent moving forward, which is what we need. So I guess with that, I cannot go through everything that was said. Those are the key issues: the education and the recognition of, you know, our contribution, positive contribution that people of who are negatively racially, you know, stereotyped and everything else that, but we have to focus on those positive things as well. You know, what we're doing, what we're contributing to Australian society. So thank you, everyone, and I'm looking forward to, you know, this journey that we're going on together. Thanks.
Thank you, Delphine. Well, Ubuntu. Well, I saw some people taking pictures and they're like, Ubuntu. I thought that's a really good one. Next time I'll ask people like, Ubuntu. I think that was a draw. So, well, I'll be quick. One of the things that, I don't know how many of you guys know how many Africans were on the first flag. Oh, yes. Okay. 12. We call them the 12 disciples. So there are 12 people. So that indicates that actually Africans has been here since the first flag. And if you go on SBS, this is a really good documentary that you could watch. But quickly, so I'm here to talk to you regarding to my trip to Geneva in May. So the one I participated in is called Economic Empowerment of People of African Descent. Our mission was clear, is to uncover the root cause of economic disparity to forge a path towards true empowerment. And that, I think, our discussion covered many of the stuff that Delphine talked about as well, but systemic racism, reparation, digital equity, breaking free from economic burdens. So when I got to Geneva, I actually got curious because in our delegates, I think there were 5 of us. And I was curious with the idea that maybe the answer to some of those questions is already wrapped up in our own personal stories. So when I said quickly, when we got to the hotel where we're staying, I said, hey guys, I really want to know your story, because some of them came from Melbourne as well. And I said, I want to know what's your story. Maybe what we're looking for, that economic empowerment story, is really wrapped up in your personal, interwoven in that. So I think I started discovering that one is that a number of them came through, they had a really good, strong support from family. I think that's one thing that stood out as a thing. The other one, they had a mentor, someone who kind of encouraged them and supported them. Another one was about education. There was someone who's constantly encouraging them to study. So maybe even that, I think Professor Katomi was talking about, those kind of looking at, maybe we overlook the main things that are important and look for a bit more complicated issues. Maybe since there's of course, it's a complicated issue, but I think there are significant things we could learn from that personal story as well. The next thing I'd like to talk about is for me, realizing there's one book called Culture and Migration. There's a guy called Thomas Sowell who wrote that book, and it discovered that, talks about a number of different community groups, or people from different countries moving to different countries and settling, and he studied which community groups and people actually end up succeeding and why. And some of the things that he pointed out in that was intact families, the high indicator. If families are intact, it's a high indicator of economic outcome. Better, well settling. I work in the settlement business, so therefore, when you have families intact coming in, that helps. That's an indicator. The other one is that if the family makes education as a one of the priorities, a value, that is also equipping them for the workforce. But I think the other thing is entrepreneurship. Our sister there was talking about entrepreneurship. The other one is about entrepreneurship skills. If you equip them with that entrepreneurship skills, if they come in, they don't speak English, and they sell veggies in a small market, they're already sharing that entrepreneurship skills to their kids. So their kids will use that skills and step it up to something else later on. So I think those three things as a main indicator. Families intact, healthy. It doesn't mean that they don't have an issue. There will be an issue there, but at least they are intact, working things out. The second one is education, and the third one is entrepreneurship skills. So after I came back, I had a conversation. I was at a meeting with the immigration minister, and someone from my friend here, Noel, who's a board member, they were sharing a story of his community. He's from a Bhutanese community, and he says that 78% of his community are homeowners. 78%. I said, wait a minute. So then, when it was break time and I run, I said, tell me, what is the secret? How did you do it? And he said 4 things. One is exactly family intact. They had an advantage when they came in from Bhutan, from Nepal here, they actually had a family intact. So they didn't have that issue of separated family or people dying in war, things like that, which some of our community face. The second one is mentorship. They have a program of mentoring. So when new people come in, what they would do that, they would actually take that person, take them on a holiday, like a tourist tour around. When that person is really high and inspired and wanted to do something, they would have a mentor that will sit with them and say, what is it you want to do? This is a new line, this is a new opportunity, what do you want to do? And then help that person do a career plan, and then help them along the way. The third one is about, I think, a strength-based approach or asset-based approach is looking at what is that we have. They are supremely important. The supreme value they have is self-reliance. So he gave me an example of when we first came, we actually had a free venue access to the council to meet as a community. But after a few weeks, we came back and said, how much does it cost for a venue? They say $5 an hour. They said, we don't want it for free. We'll pay $5. Everyone chipped in $2, $3, and they paid for that. So that means they're completely relying on what they have because they don't want to teach dependency to their children and to the community. And the final thing he told me was the last one is we celebrate everything. So every month, everyone who got their driving license, they will be celebrated. Everyone this year who finished their HSC, they'll be celebrated. So it's a community of celebrating small wins that encourages and builds those things within the community. So, I mean, right there, coming back from Geneva and looking at some of the reflection I had, and then also looking at what's happening here in Sydney. And I think it is quite clear to me that this Thomas Sowell guy, what he's talking about, and this living experience of Western Sydney of the telling me makes it more real. So with the spirit of Ubuntu, I'll call you. And I think as Professor Katomi said, dignity is so important. And I think that we need to let us not lose track of that. And I think how to dignify someone, I think this is you can't separate, you can't divide, you cannot do something, but obviously it is restoring dignity is important. That happens through relationship. So let us work. I think it was Auntie Julianne, if I've said it right. Yeah, it talked about healing. So then if the problem of poverty, and I think a lot of our community comes through places of poverty. Poverty is primarily a broken relationship. Primarily is a broken relationship. It's more than material because it erodes the dignity of that person. And eroding that dignity, the only way back to restore it is actually to heal it, and healing is through relationship, and that is true empowerment. So thank you.
I'm going to take a little bit of liberty, only because we've caught up just before Noel speaks to us. And I'm going to continue the love fest for Associate Professor Katari because I remember a post that I read on her LinkedIn account, and I think it speaks a little bit to what Daniel had mentioned at the beginning of his talk. And she talks about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And if you'll just bear with me, I'm reading her words. Mentorship recognizes that sometimes the reason why people don't get ahead is because they lack some critical skills and strategic know-hows. A mentor says, I know things you don't, and I'll support you to close the gap by sharing my knowledge and expertise. Sponsorship, on the other hand, recognizes that the issue is not about the lack of skill or expertise, but rather about access to opportunities. A sponsor says, I see your expertise, and because I have the power to do so, I will make room for you to access opportunities that you'd have otherwise never been able to get or are aware of. The rest, however, is up to you. A mentor sees what you don't have, and a sponsor sees what you have. And I think that's really important because she goes on to talk about how people of color, Indigenous people have been over-mentored. They have the skills. We have the skills in this room. And yes, there is opportunities for mentorships, but I also think those of us who can should step up and provide sponsorship as well. On that note, Mr. Noel Zihabamwe, who is a dear friend, the chairperson of the AAAC, a multi-award-winning professional, human rights advocate, and community leader, is here to have a bit of a chat to us about what we're going to do next, maybe, where we've come, where we are, where we're going. And so I think we should all just welcome him with a lot of love.
So having been here since 9 a.m. this morning, having listened to wonderful speakers, it reminded me something. I remember a long time ago, sitting in my office, having a person knocking, and then asked me, can I speak to you? Yes, of course. So I gave him a seat, and he asked me if I can offer a glass of water. He was a very good-looking man, physical and mentally. That was my external observation. And then as soon as I offered him a glass of water, he started sharing with me that he has recently purchased a house. And that was a huge achievement. So coming to Australia, in less than 7 years, he has a house, he has a family. So for him, he looked stable. He was feeling stable. However, he told me that the reason why he wanted to speak to me was when he bought a house, new house, he'd been only there for 5 to 7 months. And he'd been told, he'd been warned, he'd been experienced a nightmare. And while he acknowledges the achievement has made, he also had to share with me that he'd been told that he's not welcome in that area because he's black. Also remember, sitting in my office, having a woman from African background. She's a nurse and worked in IC, intensive care. And one day she was told by her colleague that her accent is not good and she doesn't know where she learned English. This person, in intensive care, has been working more than 27 years in Africa. And she's been working in Australia for more than 5 or 10 years. And wherever she's been working, she's been given awards. However, Next day, there was emergency patient. There was a patient emergency unit. And this patient came to us. She was from African background. And emergency unit staff could not find an interpreter. They tried to find an interpreter for that one. They could not find it. However, that woman who was told that they don't know where she learned English was around and spoke her own, the language of the patient. The only option was to use that nurse so that she can interpret what was going on with the patient from Africa. Within half an hour, the doctors were able to find out what happened to that patient. And what was made, and the patient was able to be treated. Next day, one of the doctors leading the SCO had a meeting with the nurse, and the way the nurse was explaining the case of the patient was amazing in a professional manner. Therefore, the patient was promoted actually. Not only as a nurse, also as a professional manner, that's what she told me. The third, I was walking in the scene. Then I met with this younger person, and he asked me if I can have a coffee with him. I was in the city. I said yes, and he started telling me that if you're being a black person or having a black color or skin color is an original sin according to the Bible. And then I asked him why. He said from high school, university, and where he works, he been a target. And we always ask him why he has skin color black, skin color white. Very recently, when the UN working group was here, one of the cases they were able to work with detention centers. There was a younger person whose case was very well documented. The person was detained in Gobena Immigration Detention Center. That person, a few months, was released. And then a few months later, he had to go back into the detention center. Unfortunately, that person is no longer alive as we speak. There's funeral taking place tomorrow. Last night, as I was preparing my notes for today, I got a message that there's a younger person who came to Australia at 9, and he was 9 years of age. As we speak today, he's right now he's in detention center in Geneva. He's waiting for deportation. And he has 2 younger children. And when the relative who approached him, when he asked him, does the person have a lawyer? I said, he doesn't have a lawyer because he can't afford a lawyer. Meaning that even though this person is going to be deported, maybe he never had a lawyer because he can't afford a lawyer. So the reason why I want to start with this kind of examples, those are kind of elements, or kind of the facts that pushed us to start the AAAC, African Australian Advocacy Centre. When we had those kind of issues, I remember 10 years ago, we squeezed ourselves in a very small room, the room that accommodates 5 people. But I remember we were more than 25 people there. But we had a dream. We had a dream of having a platform that where we can sit around the table like that and discuss those pertinent issues. But not only talking about those issues, also looking for action. And that's what the AAAC has come from. Now, we had that dream that it's only by having a dialogue, a conversation like this, we will be able to at least get those issues heard. So I'm so sad to share with you that kind of experience to show you, because my talk today is, it's from where to from here. So because we can't know where we are without knowing where we came from. So that's why how AAAC was formed. AAAC was formed from ongoing consultation, ongoing dialogue, ongoing talks like that, where we came not only talking about the issues that we face as an African Australian community, also looking at also the, you're celebrating, our success. And I can tell you that although we are talking about issues that has been facing your community, we also have to celebrate success. That's why I'm very pleased to see today that among our presenters, there are many people from our community who are academic, who make our community proud. And I think if we continue to do this, in the next 20 to 50 years, African Australian will make a history in Australia. I have Barack Obama. So I was allowed to speak from my heart, but today I was also told to use both my head and my heart, because as you see, my talk is from what we've been listening today, from the aim of this conference. So where to from here? So first of all, my name is Noel Zihabamwe. I'm the chair of the African Australian Advocacy Centre. And before, of course, we embark, I'd like to thank all the previous speakers, so who have shared their wisdom, expertise, perspectives, and of course, most importantly, their lived experiences as well. The contributions that they have given us have laid the foundation for our discussion today, and the insights have ignited the spark of innovation that will guide us forward. As we stand in this room, it is time to ask a vital question: where from here? This question marks a transition point, a moment of reflection, and a call to action. Yes, we've been journeying together through valuable insights and experiences. And now it's time to say that this is the path, and the path ahead is waiting for us to act. So I will say here, I'm going to use my one. So yes, from here to here. So our objective is very clear from today. So we want to foster a society free from racial discrimination, ensure equality and advance the rights and well-being of people of African descent in Australian context. The reason why I'm saying Australian context, people will think by having such advocacy group, we are trying to make what we call in French bidonville. So it's like a ghetto of people from Africa. No, we are not. So we are trying to create a platform where we can come and raise our concerns, also celebrate our success. So as we embark on this transformative journey, we understand the significance of policy and legislative alignment. So to achieve this, we have established, of course, AAAC and built collaboration with academic institutions, government, and various parts of civil society to run events like today, to undertake, collaborate on research, and most importantly, build relationships and consultations with African Australian communities, because it's by working with African communities from grassroots level that we'll be able to embark on what we call the policy review or other laws that we think are barriers to our lives. We have also started conducting a comprehensive review of existing laws and policies to identify areas where alignment with the UN recommendation is needed. We further our collaboration with legal experts, lawmakers, and human rights advocates to draft advocate to amend legislation to promote equality and combat racism. With the UN One Key Group recommendations. So, as we have been following this, and I thank you, Barbara, for being our speaker today. The UN One Key Group report highlighted the following for the AAAC, and the speakers today reaffirmed it. AAAC has decided to come up with some few basic areas that we want to focus on. One is education. We all know that education is a powerful catalyst for change. Partnering with the education institutions like Western University, RMIT, University of New South Wales through the Australian Human Rights Institute, University that we have also partnership in Western Australia, in South Australia, in Queensland. So we integrate African Australian history, contributions and experiences into curricula at all levels. It's only by working with all partners, especially academic, where we'll be able to amplify African voices. And that's what also Barbara reaffirmed. Additionally, we develop a cultural competence training for educators. As Barbara was saying, we have to educate those advocates, ensuring inclusive and respectful learning environments that celebrate our diversity. We also have to talk about law enforcement reform is a crucial step in promoting justice and equality. As I gave you aware about a case of those young people in detention centers. Collaborating with the law enforcement agencies, we advocate for mandatory training programs focused on de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and combating racial profiling. So by establishing a transparent mechanism for reporting and addressing cases of police misconduct and discrimination, we hope this will build trust and accountability. We also talked about economic empowerment and inclusion because we think that they are vital for prosperity. We hope to create partnerships with businesses to promote diversity in hiring, leadership and supply networks, to encourage mentorship and entrepreneurship programs to provide support and resources for African Australians. Data collection and analysis are essential for evidence-based policies, of course. So research is a key founding principle for African Australian percent. One area of research we want to work towards is to implement a national data collection system to document areas of discrimination experienced by African Australians to allow us to track the progress and disparities across various sectors. Of course, human rights education is the cornerstone for building an inclusive society. AAAC already works with the Australian Human Rights Institute, Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, of course, the Australian Human Rights Commission, Keep New South Wales Safe, Moving Forward Together, and others. So we hope together to encourage public awareness campaigns to be developed, to educate citizens about human rights, diversity, and importance of combating racism. Okay, strengthening your collaboration is integral to our local and global impact. We will actively participate in the local, state, federal, and international forums. Thank you, Daniel and Delphine, for representing AAAC recently. Also, of course, we had other members nationwide who also participated in those forums. So, we will be sharing your experiences when we attend events such as this. We share your experiences, challenges, and successes in advocating for the UN Working Group recommendations to be implemented. Collaboration with other groups, like-minded organizations and nationals, will enable us to exchange best practices and engage in joint initiatives to combat racism and recommendations. And of course, once again, repeat again that it's only by working with our community members that we'll be able to achieve this. So this journey, of course, requires a collective dedication, collaboration, and committed to social justice and equality for all science. So since the founding of AAAC, we have used strengths-based approaches. Thank you, Aten, for using also that term, which is very important for community capacity building. So community empowerment and collaboration are the heart of our mission. So we have started to establish community-driven initiatives that empower African Australian communities to actively participate in the decision-making process, advocate for change, and work collaboratively with the government and others to make Australia which we all now call home. And most importantly, we also want to work with no other African communities. For example, AAAC has been working with the Jewish community, to have a very good relationship with the Jewish community in New South Wales. We have a relationship with the Muslim community, Indian community. So we also want to make sure that we establish links with other external African communities and also learn from them, especially for the communities that are grown up. Especially when you look at what the Indian community, Jewish community, and for example, the Muslim communities, they are doing this so well, so there's a lesson that we can learn from them and come back to our point and share with those experiences. So, as I'm finishing now my speech, African Australian Community Survey. To continue this, I'm excited to announce the launch of the African Australian Community Survey, an essential initiative aimed at fostering a stronger and more important community. Through this survey, we seek to gain a deep understanding of needs, aspirations, priorities, and challenges. The survey is an expression of interest, and the feedback will play a vital role in establishing working groups that will champion various aspects of community advocacy, ensuring that the interests are represented and the voices are heard. So I encourage people who are here that tomorrow we're having an afternoon tea, not far from here in our office, number 41 Hunter Street. So we also call it wine and cheese. So we'll be able to promote this survey and encourage especially African community groups to take part in this community survey, because we want to empower communities, to be leading this community survey, because whatever outcomes we get from this survey, it benefits our community first. So let us come together and go forward, united in purpose. So together we can build a society that celebrates diversity, empowers communities, and upholds the principles of human rights, equality, and strive to create a brighter and more inclusive future for all Australians. Once again, thank you so much. And of course, we look forward to continue engaging and working with everyone here to advance what we all call humanity values, for not only for African Australians, but for everyone. Thank you.
Well, everyone, I think that's a wrap. Oh, Sarah, did you want to say something? Come on up.
I'll just say it here. I didn't want to be the last person to speak, but Noel is planning on going to Geneva in September. And as we can see, many people are doing this on a voluntary basis, working behind the scenes. I know I've been in so many meetings. I'm sure Delphine and Daniel potentially funded themselves to go to the UN. So we wanted to just have a practical action of those of you who may have networks who would like to sponsor Noel's trip in September. The full report will be presented to the Human Rights Council, along with the recommendations from today, the survey. So you can contact Noel directly, Delphine, Daniel, Kirsten, if you want to get the bank details to donate to that trip.
To have an incredible drummer here, so he's going to play us out. You're more than welcome to get involved, but thank you very much. It's been an absolute privilege for us all to come together, and let this be the beginning of our conversations.